Welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Mistopoulos, and on behalf of the Just in Time Training Network, we welcome you to today's webinar, and it is titled A Parent's Guide to Understanding Autism. And it's perfect timing to deliver this webinar since it is Autism Awareness Month. So we're thrilled that you all could join us. I am going to go through just a few quick slides, and then I'll be turning it over to our presenters. Okay, today's presenters are from Family Initiative, and we are thrilled to have them. And they are Jamie Fusco and Trey Willoughby. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are. We're the Just in Time Training Network, and we are a web-based online training management learning I'm talking good today. Learning management system we have over 200 training videos to support caregivers and staff that support them that are for our children and families in care. So we also have all kinds of resources and calendars and all kinds of information on our websites to really help support caregivers and others that are working with children in care. And the great news is we have rolled out our new learning management system to our existing network partners, and we are ready to sign on more agencies. So if you happen to be part of an agency that is not a part of the Just in Time Training Network, we would encourage you to reach out. We would love for you to learn more. This URL that's listed here at www.jittrainingnetwork.org/learn more has more information on the titles that we have available and more about our network. And with that, I am going to go ahead and welcome our presenters, Jamie and Trey, and I'm going to turn this over to them.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're super excited for you all to join today. My name is Jamie Fusco. I am the Director of Transitional Services here at Family Initiative. This is...
Hi, I'm Trey. I am an autism advocate for Family Initiative.
So today we wanted to do an overview of what, an autism spectrum diagnosis could look like, and just kind of give some strategies, tips and tricks, and take a lot of your questions. So without further ado, we are going to share our screen. There we go. So welcome to A Parent's Guide to Understanding Autism. Today we're going to talk about the prevalence of ASD, an autism overview, general approaches and strategies, as well as self-advocacy. That is a really great tool for all of our friends to have in order to communicate and get their wants and needs across.
Autism affects 1 in 36 children in the U.S. ASD prevalence in the U.S. has increased by 312% since 2000. Boys are diagnosed with autism 4.2 times more often than girls.
Yep, so every year they release the new prevalence of ASD, and it has been increasing since 2000. There's a lot of talk on whether it's that people are maybe just noticing it more and there are more testing and things of that nature, and that's why we're seeing the higher increase. So autism is just that. Autism is a spectrum disorder. That means that it is a broad range. But everyone does have certain things in common, which would be persistent deficits in social communication and interaction across multiple contexts. So that's going to be your social, emotional, your nonverbal communication behaviors, developing and maintaining relationships, as well as maybe having restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior. So it might be the stereotype movements. You might see some hand flapping, things like that. Instances of sameness, so everything must be, the color red in order for our friends to eat it. Restricted fixated interests, maybe we only like dinosaurs, and hyperfixation.
Some behaviors common to ASD are lack of eye contact, perspective taking, possessing a picture system to communicate, inability to understand social cues, sensory overload, fixation on narrow interests, items, ideas, people, or topics, no fear of danger, understanding of consequences, odd fears, fear things of little danger, and taking figurative language literally. Repeating your questions, words, movements. They could have meltdowns, self-injurious behaviors. They may appear as if under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which could lead to being maybe defiant, engaging in behavior without understanding consequence. They may not respond to their name or verbal commands. They may be attracted to water, and they may run or bolt into traffic.
So now that we went over some of the common behaviors to ASD, we also wanted to kind of give a little bit more into our background and why we are doing this training. So I am a mom of 7, 2 of which my children have ASD. So I have a parent's perspective in that manner, as well as I can see through the lens of a professional manner, because I am also an RBT and a special education advocate. Now, Trey, on the other hand,
I was diagnosed at 8 years old with autism, or Asperger's as it was. I am also a paraprofessional for the local school district. So I work with a lot of students with ASD. So I've seen the different behaviors as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, so in this video, it's going to be our autism simulator. It's going to kind of give you a little insight into what maybe some of our friends are dealing with on a daily basis.
Perfect. Come on then, have a great day. Thanks for keeping an eye on it.
Off somewhere fun today? Are you all right?
What gift have you got, Sam? It's just a calculator.
Off somewhere fun today? Are you all right? Off somewhere fun today? You all right?
What gift did you get, Sam? It's just a calculator. Sorry, did he scare you? Yes, Sam. Is it a calculator? What gift did you get? Is it a calculator?
What are you doing? You trying to kill yourself? Are you blind?
Have you seen this epic fail? What's that like? Have you seen this epic fail?
Somewhere fun today? Are you all right?
What are you doing? You trying to kill yourself? Are you blind?
Sorry, did he scare you? Is it a calculator? Sorry, did he scare you? I thought you were...
We're out of napkins. Do you want to see what's special?
Are you okay? How can I help?
I'm autistic, and sometimes I get too much information.
Are you okay? How can I help?
So that was just a little video to kind of give a different perspective on how something that can maybe happen in the beginning of the day can actually stay with them the whole entire day. So sometimes when we do see that an individual on the spectrum is maybe having a hard time, it might not be something that just immediately happened. It could be something that has happened quite a few hours ago, right?
Yes,
Most definitely. So one of the behaviors that we wanted to discuss is stimming, what it looks like. So this could be hand and finger mannerisms. I know a lot of times you might see hand flapping. Sometimes you're going to see different, hand picking and things like that. Unusual body movements. Maybe they're rocking while they're sitting or standing. Posturing. So it could be that they're just kind of going a certain way. Visual simulation, which can be an object moving back and forth. Maybe it's even involving the hands with the back and forth in front of the face. Repetitive behaviors, which could be opening and closing doors, chewing or mouthing objects, listening to the same song over and over again. Why is this done? It's because it helps manage emotions like fear, anxiety, excitement. It helps manage overwhelming sensory information, and it just basically makes them feel good. What to do? You don't want to interrupt unless it's something that is a danger to themselves or to others. And you want to find a person that knows their routine. So if stimming isn't hurting anyone, then you should usually just let your friend be. Our next video talks a little bit more about what those repetitive behaviors are and why.
The people, the lights, the sounds, school can be an overwhelming experience. But repeatedly lining up your pencils in order of color and length might help. Or what about drumming your fingers to a steady beat? Or spinning around in circles, arms outstretched to the world? These kinds of behaviors all fall under the description of restricted and repetitive behaviors. They appear from a young age in people with autism and are one of the condition's core features, alongside problems with social communication. Typically, restricted and repetitive behaviors fall into two categories. Low-order behaviors are motor and sensory in nature and can include hand flapping, rocking back and forth, spinning, playing persistently with objects, and uttering repeated sounds. Some people describe these behaviors as stimming. High-order behaviors are more cognitive and take the form of intensely focused interests, ritualistic habits, and an insistence on sameness and routine. There's scant research exploring these behaviors, but we do know that repetitive movements occur as part of regular development in all young children. Because they persist beyond childhood in those with autism, disruptions in typical development could be involved. Emerging research also shows that when autistic people engage in restricted and repetitive behaviors, their brains show greater activity in the reward circuits, just as eating cake or winning an award might do. That might help explain why many people on the spectrum engage in them regularly. As this research progresses, clinicians and caregivers continue to question how, and if, they should intervene to stop or control repetitive behaviors. Historically, these behaviors were viewed as having no inherent value, and it was thought best to suppress them. That may still be the case when they are harmful, like with repetitive headbanging. But there has been a dramatic change in thinking when it comes to stimming. Many experts now believe that some repetitive behaviors are coping mechanisms, and as such deserve more thoughtful management. In support of that idea, many autistic people describe their repetitive behaviors as a source of focus or calm when they feel overwhelmed or need to manage anxiety. They may need to stim less if they have access to earplugs and sunglasses to buffer against sensory overload, or a new routine to create a greater sense of structure. Some autistic people say they simply enjoy engaging in repetitive behaviors, much like a hobby. Others say they are a way of communicating and expressing emotions. Taking these behaviors away would strip them of these benefits and might cause frustration and withdrawal. Caregivers might enable an autistic relative to perform an activity of interest, like examining train schedules, in a safe space, but establish gentle boundaries, like limiting the amount of time spent on it. Striking a balance between adaptation and acceptance can lead to great things, including new experiences, interests, and talents.
So the thing about stimming is we all actually do a form of stimming, whether you're maybe a little nervous and you start tapping your feet, you start tapping on a table, you've ever been on hold, maybe you start doodling on, a little notebook. All of those things are part of stimming. It's just sometimes our friends that are on the spectrum maybe do things that are a little more noticeable.
Another behavior we want to look at is perseveration. What it looks like. They could be stuck on one topic or loop that they can't get out of. Typically won't accept redirection and continue to get stuck. They might talk all the time about a movie or show or something they really like, or an object they must have on them at all times. Why it's done. It's a reaction to managing stress, processing information, shifting attention, or they get stuck in their emotions, actions, and thoughts. What to do? Find a person that knows their routine as soon as possible. Talk about it. Respond with empathy.
And perseveration is a pretty big one. I know my 12-year-old loves to script anything and everything SpongeBob. And then we will perseverate on a certain line from a movie, and we need to talk about it at least probably 50 times a day. So it can be a little tricky at times, and redirection is definitely your friend when it comes to things like that. We're going to talk a little bit about why does behavior occur, and it's called the ABCs, because you're going to have your antecedent, which is your A, your behavior, which is your B, and your consequence, which is your C. And a consequence could be both a positive or a negative. It's just something that immediately occurs after the behavior. So on our PowerPoint over here, we see that our antecedent is our trigger. So that's going to be something that happened prior. Then you have your behavior, whether it's inappropriate, and then you're going to have your consequence, which is your payoff. We want to try to redirect it so that we have your antecedent or your trigger. We're going to turn it into an appropriate behavior, and then you'll have a positive payoff or consequence. So there's different ways to do this. For instance, say you have two children, and little Johnny wants Susie's video game controller. So what does she do? What does he do? Little Johnny hits Susie, and then Susie drops the video game controller, so little Johnny wins. So the trigger antecedent was that Susie had the controller, not Johnny. The inappropriate behavior was that Johnny hit Susie, and the payoff or consequence for that was that Johnny got the video game controller. So what that shows Johnny is he can continue to hit Susie to get the video game controller. So how we can shape that behavior is on the other flip of the coin. So Johnny wants the video game controller that Susie has. Instead of having Johnny hit Susie to get it, he can say, Susie, can I have the controller?
Yes, you can have the control.
And then Susie can give Johnny the controller, and he has a positive payoff or a consequence. So that's just one of the examples on how we can change that.
Knowledge is power. Autism is a spectrum. There is an extremely large range of skill and ability. Still, some characteristics are similar and you can prepare to meet the needs of the individual knowing this. Preference for routine. They have a preference for routine, whether they like visual versus verbal, longer processing time when talking or being spoken to, and they often get overstimulated or overwhelmed with lots of sensory input.
Mm-hmm. And this can look different for every person, because just because you've met one person on the spectrum means just that. You've met one individual on the spectrum. Everyone is different. Just like you and I are different, everyone on the spectrum is different as well. I can say out of my two children, they are night and day. One has, certain preferences. The other one could not even be bothered with what he likes. So this is why we're going to roll into our point of view. This is going to be a point of view from an individual who is on the spectrum, who is nonverbal. And it's just kind of to give a look into the nonverbal world and how, even though someone cannot verbally communicate, it does not mean that they do not understand everything that's going around them, that they don't hear everything, and that they can't communicate themselves in a different way. Right, Trey?
Right.
I can't wait for a coffee. Oh, hello, barista.
What do you girls want?
Skim soy latte? Darren, soy can't be skim.
Hot chocolate, orange juice.
No, Dad, I want a coffee. Hot chocolate? Great.
So I was thinking of going to Sarah's later. Could you give me a ride?
Yeah, sure. Are you cool with taking your sister?
Yeah.
Wait, what? I have my own plan.
Carly.
Okay, I'll see you tonight, okay?
How can I help?
So that was a little expert, I can't even say from Carly. She actually was, well, she's nonverbal individual. She was unable to communicate with her family or caregivers for about the first 12 years, right? 12 years of her life. And one day she typed on the computer, sick, and then she ran over to the sink and threw up. And that's how they were able to realize that Carly can type, and she was able to communicate that way. So since then, she's been on different talk shows. She's actually written a book with her father, and she's been able to communicate that way and get her story told to everyone, which I just think is a super cool situation. But we also want to just remember, just because our children or our, our friends, I call everyone my friends, just because they have a diagnosis doesn't mean that they can't communicate their wants and needs. Maybe they just need a little extra support in order to get those wants and needs across. And I do think that a lot of times maybe adults tend to speak for our children and individuals on the spectrum, and then that's where you can see some behaviors occur because we think we know what they're saying, but in actuality it's not. Right, do you have any?
I mean, I've experienced it a lot where people would answer for me, and I've also seen it while at work where people have answered for the kids, and I have to remind them that they have a communication board that you could be asking them the question so that they can actually answer for themselves instead of just being pushed to do something that they may not want to do.
Mm-hmm. And it is hard because sometimes it may take a little bit of extra time. That's where you can get your latency, which is you want to track how long it takes for an individual to respond. So maybe you ask a question and you count in your head 10 seconds, which could totally feel like a lifetime, but sometimes that's how much time our friends need. And then you might be able to see, oh, they only needed a little extra time, and then I can go back and forth and have a conversation. Not sure. I think it's your turn.
So we just need to remember to be proactive with visual supports, having routines for home and school, expectations for behavior, schedule for the day, labeling important or necessary items, creating consistency, trying to provide a healthy balance of familiarity in any way, languages, items, food, being on the same page with others.
Mm-hmm. I think the last one's the most important, to be on the same page as others, because it does take a team, and a lot of times maybe one person isn't on the same page, so they're giving different demands and expecting different things, and then the other person's like, oh well, no, we already did that, I said that was fine. So that can also create behaviors. Why is it critical to recognize ASD? In emergency situations, people with ASD do not necessarily react in a predictable manner. I mean, think about an emergency situation for any of us. Usually everyone's heightened, we're anxiety provoked. No one's really in the same safe mindset. We need to pre-plan our responses and think outside of the box. So if it is something that is going to be a stressful situation or things like that, you want to pre-plan so that you are better able to support your child. You want to begin to understand a rapidly growing population. Autism, it's 1 in 36 this year. It could go up next year. That's basically one student in every classroom is diagnosed with autism. And I'm sure there are actually many more. Some of our friends mask better than others, especially girls. And people with ASD do not appreciate danger and may put themselves in harm's way. So what that means is that some of our friends do not realize that, if they're in fight or flight and they're nervous and they're going to run across the street, oh my gosh, I have to look both ways, a car can get me, right? Or they really like the water, they're going to just jump right into any body of water, not thinking, oh, maybe there's like sharks or alligators or something like that, because we are in Florida.
We want to help the child be successful by always giving wait time, being patient, providing choices, being aware of their behaviors or sleep patterns, and communicating with the entire team. We also want to provide a safe space for them.
Mm-hmm. And I will say providing choices is like key. And you don't necessarily have to provide two like off the wall choices. You can provide two choices that will basically get you the same outcome, but you're allowing your child to make those choices on their own, which one is increasing their independence, two is just helping out with their self-esteem and their self-confidence, right? So they're knowing that their voice matters, and that's super important. Add on that one? Yeah. So now we go into self-advocacy. This, I think, is number one, hands down, one of the most important things that we ever want to teach any of our children, regardless if they have a diagnosis or not, but especially if they have a diagnosis. This refers to the individual's ability to effectively communicate, convey, negotiate, assert his or her own interests and desires. It's very important that we start at an early age to let them know that their voice matters. With the right tools, practice, support, and understanding, people can learn to express their needs and navigate their world confidently and safely. Self-advocacy gives friends with learning disabilities the confidence and tools that they need to be successful in the real world. Now, I know some parents are like, oh, but what if they're becoming too assertive and they're going to take this to a whole new level? Yes, that can happen, but with everything, you need to have a nice balance. How can we promote self-advocacy, Trey?
By helping friends begin to identify their triggers or situations that are difficult for them and the self-regulation strategies they can use. They can start to recognize things like how noisy environments, specific academic tasks, or changes in routine affect them. They can also learn to identify which coping strategies help them and let others know which they prefer. Creating opportunities to conduct experiments in which they can test out different strategies to support their own learning and independence rather than relying on the adults around them. They should be encouraged to communicate how others' actions make them feel and learn how to set their own boundaries. Mm-hmm. For friends who struggle to communicate verbally, it is critical to maximize their opportunities to communicate for themselves. It is common for people like teachers or therapists to talk to family members about the teen rather than talking to the student directly, or to talk to the teen as though they were much younger. These patterns often continue into adulthood. It is important to empower these individuals to express their thoughts and wishes directly to others and to be sure their voices are heard. So for this one piece, I work primarily right now with teens and young adults who are on the spectrum. And this is like the number one thing across the board that most of my friends have said that they don't like and they don't appreciate, is that just because they have a diagnosis, they said that a lot of adults treat them like they're babies, like they're 5, and they could be 16 or they can be 20. And they're like, we don't understand why people talk to us like we're little. So I just know, like, really like that age appropriateness with talking in general. That's something that, right, the word on the street is what they've been saying. Yeah. Becoming an effective self-advocate is a lifelong journey, and we can all continue to be better at advocating for ourselves by listening to their thoughts and feelings, modeling respectful communication, and encouraging our students to speak up for themselves. We can prepare our friends to advocate for themselves throughout their lives. Mm-hmm. And it starts with the parent or the caregiver. Like, we start advocating for them to show them that they can advocate for themselves. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Like, this is a whole lifelong thing. We're still learning how to advocate for ourselves, but it is a really important skill to have in order to be successful in the future.
So we're going to talk a little bit about ASD behavior under stress. They may flee the uncomfortable situation, back to that fight or flight mode, right? They may engage in excessive stimming, which could be, for instance, like if it was the hand flapping, maybe when they're very much under stress, it's like extremely flapping. And I keep going back to the hand flapping. It's just because where I'm standing, I feel like this is the only action you guys can really see right now. They may be combative. All of a sudden, they're like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, absolutely not, because they're under stress, which again, that's a typical reaction if anyone is under stress. It just may be completely amplified due to their diagnosis. They may place hands over ears because they're just so overwhelmed, and they then just completely shut down. Do you want to share anything?
I would just say that with stimming, I am a pacer, and I am also one to shut down. And as an adult, that's much harder to recognize for other people, because at work, if you just shut down, they think you're just ignoring them, and they get stressed out and even stress you out more because they're not sure what's going on. And it's just important to give them their space and have patience when they're under stress.
Yeah, definitely. I think patience, right? Have patience, give everyone a little bit of space.
Things to remember: your energy and awareness makes a huge difference. Receptively can understand better than expressively can speak. The need for sign language, text, or other communication device. Social world is more challenging than neurotypical and sensory issues. And it's also important to remember that each individual you meet is unique.
And back to the whole social world is more challenging for our friends on the spectrum. I will say that my oldest child is 18. She is on the spectrum. And she has just articulated to me that she's like, it is so hard to have conversations, you know, like with peers, because she's just so afraid to say the wrong thing. And I'm like, it's okay if you say the wrong thing. I'm like, I say the wrong thing all the time. But in her mind, she has all these rules and regulations set up. And she's like, no, you cannot say the wrong thing, because then it's just like, that's it. No one's ever going to talk to me again. And then I'm not going to have any friends. So it's key to remember that sometimes things we take for granted, our friends are really struggling and having a hard time with. We're going to open it up to questions.
How can we determine the difference between autism, stimming, repetitive movements, and ordering, and OCD? My child has OCD, but is being retested for autism, and I'm trying to understand when it's helpful to encourage her to disrupt an OCD loop versus letting her stim. That's a great question.
That is a very good question. And a lot of times there is like a double diagnosis. So a lot of our friends who do have an ASD diagnosis, they also have an OCD diagnosis, because some of the things are very, very similar. When do you notice the behaviors? That's going to be the number one tell. So if you see that it's something where maybe the stim is, give me something, Trey.
For OCD.
Yeah.
Tapping objects.
Okay, so maybe we're tapping objects, right? But perhaps that's just more of a ritual thing. Like, so they come in the room, they need to tap every single thing they see. That's not necessarily a stim. A stim is going to be something where they're going to be like tapping all the time, and it's more because, one, they're bored. Two, maybe they're super excited. Three, they could be nervous. But it's not something that always has to happen at the same time. So I would kind of look at when it's happening and like why it's happening. Like, what do you see is occurring before or after you see these behaviors, to try to distinguish on whether or not this could be OCD or it could be actual stimming.
So is there an opportunity that you would use the applied behavior analysis with children with autism?
So ABA is like a hot topic in the autism community. It can be both positive or negative. I think it really just depends on the provider that you have and that they are willing to meet the needs of your children and your family. I personally, I am an RBT, so I do deliver ABA services. We use ABA in my home, but it looks a little different in, you know, every single person's home. It is an evidence-based approach that does help with shaping behavior and improving the quality of life for individuals and families. But the whole goal of ABA is to give the parents the tools in their toolbox so that then they can make it work for their family.
Okay, great. When it comes to advocacy, where can we go to begin to understand what accommodations are available so that we are educated enough to know what to request?
That's a very good question. So depending on your state, I would first try to go into like Google different things in your state to see like state advocates, but you can do rights law. They have all different listing of different accommodations that can help academically for your child. Like, is this talking more about academics or is it just in general for different accommodations?
In general.
Okay. I would definitely say to go to the rights law website. They have all different books and tips and tricks to kind of give you the basis of some accommodations, specifically if your child has an IEP and what is, you know, what you need. Also, if you guys, at the end of the slide, we can re-show it. We have our contact information. I am a board certified advocate in special education, so I am more than willing to help guide you guys through the process to get you in different information and connect you with the different places that would be able to most benefit your child with that situation. You can get accommodations at school, at work. The thing if you're, you know, have an older child or a young adult, if they do want to get accommodations in the workplace, they do have to disclose that they have a diagnosis, but that is person whether they have the right to disclose or not. What is your tip?
Definitely do some research and check for your area and see what is available. There's also, if you're on Facebook or social media, there's also many groups across everywhere that involve special education, or just people with disabilities who can explain what they've been through and what they can offer. So just it'd be good to check for those.
And you can also connect with your local APD, Agencies of Persons with Disabilities. They are a great resource and will have everything, you know, at their fingertips.
Okay, that's fantastic. We have another question here, and they're asking, do tics occur as stimming or part of autism?
It honestly, it could be both. Some of our friends like to model behavior. So we saw that someone had like a little tic and then they liked it and then they made it for themselves and that became a stim, or it could have been a tic that just happened and then they wound up that like they enjoyed it and it gave them self-soothing. So then they continued, but I really wouldn't be able to tell which is which, right? It really depends on the individual. I would definitely, if you you know, have these questions and are unsure, definitely reach out to your child's doctor, whether it's their pediatrician, their neurologist, psychologist, whoever it is that you see, you know, and inform them about your concerns because you're all part of a team.
Okay, great. How do you deal with, I'm going to assume this is, how do you deal with aggressive behaviors?
So aggressive behaviors, one, the first thing is you need to see the child before the behavior, which can be very tricky when you're seeing, you know, different levels of aggression. If they're not hurting themselves, but it's more of a property destruction, you want to just kind of get them in a safe place, but then try to actively ignore the behavior, but always keep one eye on them to make sure that they are okay. It is very challenging when you are dealing with an aggressive behavior as the caregiver or the parent to not get emotionally involved and want, excuse me, to react, you know, to the behaviors. But the best thing is you need to be calm so then they can be calm. So, you know, maybe Trey is coming at me and screaming. If I match his energy and I'm coming at him screaming, it's just going to completely escalate. So you want to start, you know, you talk in a lower voice. You want to be like, hey, I see you're upset. What's going on? And try to get them to come down, you know, to your level. You want to meet them where they are, and then you can go from there. It's easier said than done, but you got to come in nice and calm yourself. And just even, for instance, my son, I'll be like, let's take some deep breaths. And he's like, I don't want to take deep breaths. So I don't even say that. I just start coming in and I'll sit next to him and I'll start taking some deep breaths. And then eventually he'll start taking deep breaths. And then we're all, you know, nice and calm after a little bit. But it does take time, patience, and you got to come in nice and calm yourself.
My cousin doesn't give eye contact, but his hands keep going. Is that okay? Should we give him something to hold his hands?
So when he doesn't make eye contact, like when he's talking and he's just moving his hands all around, you can always try different fidgets. There are so many fidgets out there, and now they're way more easily accessible, you know, than in the past. You can go on Amazon and basically order anything. I would definitely try different things to see if he can put something in his hand, because then he might be able to focus a little bit more. And, you know, you can start things where like, hey, I can't hear you if I don't see your eye. Like start like little things like, oh, let me know you're listening, and just kind of point in the general area while he has something in his hands to keep him busy. Do you have any other tips?
I mean, just like you said, just keep reminding them to look in that general direction, or just at least at the nose so it looks like they're looking at you in the eyes.
But definitely, I think giving him something to manipulate in his hands would help him focus. Because a lot of times maybe we're so distracted by the stimming that we can't focus on what we need to get done.
Okay, fantastic. We have another question here about if maybe you have any experience with someone chewing string or holes in blankets as a behavior.
I would suggest, like, if they are chewing on, you know, inappropriate objects, they have these chewy things. They make them in necklaces, they'll make them in rings, they make them as pencil toppers. They're like a thicker rubber type material that is safe to chew on, but they have different chewy items like that that might be able to help.
We did, real quick, Jamie, we did have a question come across. At what age should you have your child diagnosed for autism if you are concerned or maybe seeing any signs?
Really, it's key to get early intervention. You want to try to get them diagnosed as soon as possible. My daughter was diagnosed at 3, and my son, it was a little longer because we had changed states and Florida's a little slow. So he was 4. But really, it's any age as long as you can get, you know, in and get the ADOS testing done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Trey. You guys are wonderful, and we just appreciate you sharing this very, very valuable information.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.